So let's dive into a really fascinating proposal today, a spiritual framework that's being presented as a potential solution for our global problems. The source material kicks off with a huge question. As we start thinking about new world orders, even colonizing other planets, what principles are we going to use to make sure we don't just repeat the same old mistakes all over again?
And it's a question I think a lot of us have asked ourselves at some point, right? It doesn't matter what the system is, there's just this constant feeling that something is fundamentally broken. Why is it that our governments, our social structures, why do they always seem to fall short?
And look, the stakes couldn't be higher. We're not just talking about one or two little problems. The source points to this whole tangled web of crises. You've got racism, family breakdown, a massive mental health crisis, this crazy overconsumerism, environmental collapse, and of course, hunger and poverty. The thing is, none of these are happening in a vacuum. They all feed into each other. So what is the root cause of all of this? This is where things get really interesting. The source makes a pretty bold claim here, arguing that the problem isn't actually the type of government we have, it's something running much, much deeper. I mean, take a look. The analysis here breaks down all these different systems. You've got democracy, which gets corrupted by greed and corporate money. You've got monarchy, where power is just based on who your parents were. Communism, which crushes the human spirit. Autocracy, driven by pure ego. The source argues they all end up failing for pretty much the same very human reasons. And that right there is the core idea. The crucial point is this. The universal problem isn't the political label we slap on the box. It's the consciousness of the people inside it, the leaders and the citizens. It's leadership that's driven by purely material things, by temporary gains. So what does this material consciousness actually look like on the ground? Well, it's exactly what you think. It's leaders motivated by a bottomless greed for power and a lust for wealth. It's a world where everyone is a competitor you have to beat. It's making decisions from a place of passion and ignorance, not wisdom. And it's everywhere because, let's be honest, it's kind of the default setting for a society that isn't actively trying to aim for something higher. Okay, so if that's the diagnosis, what's the cure? The source doesn't just point out the problems, it actually proposes an alternative. So let's get into its framework for a higher consciousness, one it says is based on eternal divine principles. Now, the solution that's put on the table is called Krishna consciousness, and it's really important to see how the source frames this. It's not being presented as just a religion in the way we normally think of it, but as a complete system for elevating the way we think and live. The whole goal is to create communities that are guided by these perfect, timeless laws, instead of the flawed, constantly changing laws that we humans come up with. Okay, but the big question is, does this stuff actually work in the real world? Is there any proof? Well, the source gives us two totally different case studies to look at as evidence. One is super ancient, and the other is surprisingly modern. Let's check them out. First up, we have this ancient story about a prince, Prahlad Maharaj. And this quote just captures the idea perfectly. Imagine this. He was born into this totally materialistic, power-hungry family. But because of his deep spiritual awareness, he was completely untouched by that toxic environment. It's this incredible metaphor for how consciousness can overcome circumstance. And then we jump forward thousands of years to something much more modern, the 1960s. You had a lot of hippies who were completely fed up with materialism. They were searching for meaning, but a lot of them ended up in some pretty destructive places. The source describes how Krishna consciousness basically gave them a way out, a path to trade in those harmful habits for actual spiritual practices. And in doing that, they found a real community and a genuine purpose.
And this wasn't just some small change. The impact was, well, life-saving for some people. This quote from an early follower really drives it home. This was a lifeline for a whole generation that was adrift and really struggling.
Okay, so we've seen how this can change one person at a time. But what if you built an entire society on these principles? What would that actually look like? For that, the source points us to this ancient Vedic kingdom that was ruled by a legendary king, Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira, calling it the perfect blueprint. And the way the ancient texts describe this kingdom, it's just beautiful. Listen to this one quote from the Srimad Bhagavatam. It creates this image of a world that's in perfect harmony, where even the animals are happy and just overflowing with abundance. It suggests that when society gets in sync with divine principles, everything flourishes. So what does that actually get you? Well, the results, they sound almost utopian. The texts talk about a world where nature just provides everything you need. where people are free from anxiety and sickness. Even the weather is balanced. Every single citizen is protected, and the whole world is united. It's a pretty stark contrast to that list of crises we started with, huh?
And this all hinges on a really key concept, the Sanskrit word, praja. It means all that is born. And this is so important because in this model, a leader's job wasn't just to protect the human citizens. It was to protect every single living being, animals, plants, you name it. It's a totally holistic and frankly, a pretty radical way of thinking about government.
So how is that even possible? How can one leader care for everything? Well, the source uses this brilliant analogy. If you want to take care of a tree, you don't run around trying to water every single leaf, right? No, you water the root, and the whole tree gets nourished automatically. The idea here is that by serving the ultimate source of everything, God, the well-being of all the individual parts is just naturally taken care of. So we've looked at the problem, the solution, and even a historical blueprint for what a harmonious society could look like. But what does any of this have to do with us right now and our future? The argument being made here is pretty simple, but it's also profound. As we're facing all these global challenges, as we're looking to the stars, maybe the blueprint we need isn't something brand new we have to invent. Maybe it's ancient wisdom we just need to rediscover. And that leaves us with one last massive question to think about. At the very beginning, we mentioned colonizing the moon and Mars. So the ultimate takeaway is this. As we expand our reach out into the cosmos, are we just going to export the same flawed material consciousness that created all the problems we have here on Earth? Or are we going to bring something higher with us? Which future are we going to build?